Hello, my name is Mati and welcome to Estonian Real Podcast. My today's guest is Damani Bryant Felder. He has his own YouTube channel called White Borders, where with his brother, they fight for the beauty called independent thought. And our today's topic is we talked about the Canadian Freedom Convoy, standing up for rights and standing up for freedom. But Damani, thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me from way across the other side of the world. It's good to be here. For those of you who don't know, I'm here in Houston, Texas, actually, and it's only 8 p.m. here, but I know it's a totally different part of the world over there. So thank you for having me and making this happen. I appreciate it.
Okay, but I'm glad you decided to join. But can you tell us more about yourself, besides being a YouTuber and so on, and fighting for our rights?
Yeah, so we talk about our rights. I mean, I'm privileged to live here in America, but there are other people in other countries around the world. And one of the most fundamental rights that people have, no matter what country you're from, is the right to be free, the right to choose what you put inside your own body, the right to politely refuse when governments force you to inject yourself with things you disagree with. Part of why I started speaking out so much was because I started noticing almost 10 years ago now, when I was still in college at Texas A&M University, I started noticing how society was beginning to change. I started noticing how what was formerly accepted thought was becoming or coming more and more under attack. So I started speaking out on social media, and then one thing led to another. Years go by, and I'm not just on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm even on TikTok. Just preaching that message of freedom, bodily autonomy, personal responsibility, fiscal responsibility, being financially responsible, all things that you would think would be common sense. But in this crazy world, as you and I both well know, it no longer seems to be common sense by the powers that be. So we have to stand up and fight for what is most important here in America, in Estonia, and in many other countries around the world if we hope to continue to enjoy prosperity and success of the human race.
You mentioned that 10 years ago, when you in college, you start noticing small changes that were like leading for a bad path. Can you tell us what was those small changes you noticed first?
Yeah, so roughly almost 10 years ago now was when Black Lives Matter, the BLM movement, began gaining more momentum here in America. That started happening around 2013. And that was when I started to really have to confront the notion that there was a part of society out there that was very much opposed to things that I thought were common sense, very much opposed to reality, as it were. So I started noticing how much of a furor BLM was able to whip up. At that time, it was in Missouri, I believe. And I continue to see that sentiment begin to even invade college campuses, even on my own college campus. Not only that, but also the LGBT movement at that time was beginning to gain more momentum. And there were talks about holding marches and doing all of these extremely flamboyant things. And while I think, if you want to do that yourself, you go ahead, that's not my problem. My issue was they started to force their own views on other people or choose to go to an event only to create a scene or to cause chaos. And I have a huge problem with that because these are individuals who are not happy just being in their own zone. They want to invade and permeate every part of our lives. And we've seen over the last 10 years, entities like BLM and the LGBT community go from just their own movements that weren't really hurting anyone in the past on a large scale public level to now where we have riots that people are prepared for whenever there's a verdict they don't like. We have people going out and trying to advocate for trans children, talking about minor attracted persons. Like, it's gotten out of control very quickly, but such is the nature of the slow boil of that political correctness. And we've seen that begin to take further hold here in America. And I know in other countries around the world, it is much the same.
Yeah, I think that point in my perspective that it was for me like the smallest things were in 2009 where the swine flu or bird flu, I don't remember what's one, but when the first thing was for me was a little bit small the clue was that the TV told there is a pandemic, wash your hand and when for me like everybody started doing that like for me like okay what's going on, but because it was like for me I was still young, I didn't know anything, but later on I started noticing that just like for example the transgender activism, LGBTQ movement and so on, what you and BLM movement. When I started noticing that there was like this is they forcing us like if like there was also other side who was like discussing like we do it. Okay, let's talk about okay what's the problem, what's the issue, how we can solve it, so on. But they all know that's just thing, and I think when I want this and one now, and there are no other thoughts like was allowed for me. But
Yeah, no,
okay,
I remember
continue.
with H1N1, that was around 10 years ago now. And it's very revealing how not just H1N1, but also the Zika virus and many other things over the course of our lives. You do turn on the news sometimes and you will hear about it, but never before had we seen the large scale freak out that happened with COVID. And it was too easy for the media to pull that off. Here in America, unfortunately, there's too many people who take whatever the mainstream media says as gospel. And part of my maturation process in this political journey has been learning how to look at the world around me with my own eyes, and then also know that I should always be verifying what the media tells me. Now, it's very disconcerting to the average person when they realize that the media might not tell them the full story, but that's really where the journey begins. Once you have that as your baseline, then you know, okay, I need to go a step further than what I've been told. With BLM, with the H1N1, with Zika, swine, whatever you want to call it, you have to go that step further. And the reason that America and many other Western countries even are where we are today is because we just, unfortunately, largely take in whatever we are told and never go that step further. And if you never go that step further, you'll never see the entire picture.
Is it because the comfort this our society offers that okay we take like everything for granted and we believe that media telling us truth, the government is telling us truth, but in reality it's completely different. And do you think this is the case?
Oh yeah, 100%. There's a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase parts of it, but it says, good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times, and hard times create strong men. And that's really the cycle that we find ourselves in yet again. There's so little real, true, I would say, aggression or even masculinity here in America. And that's by design as well. We've seen our society begin to look at everything around them as if the world owes them something. They look at entertainment. They expect to be entertained all the time. They expect to have something to do all the time. And really, when you think back to those first few weeks of lockdown, that happened almost 2 years ago now, you remember that there seemed to be an awakening of sorts. I remember this vividly because there were people who they didn't have any more distractions. There was no more NBA, there's no more NFL, no more sports, there was no more anything. And people had to sit there and sit at home. And for those who were initiated, that's when their learning process hit the next level, is when all those distractions were taken away from them. But because we live in a world now where much of that has returned, we see too many people who have fallen asleep yet again. And we're seeing the result as it continues to rock our society from the inside out.
When those distractions were like all moved, and how many people was like starting wake up, or this waking up is still like in progress?
If I had to put a number on it, I would say maybe 15 to 20% of people who, I'm aware of. And I think across the board, that's a pretty good number. I'd say 50 to 25% even actually woke up. But the other 75, 80, 85%, have remained asleep or almost in a state of suspended animation, where it's almost just like they're stuck, they're just floating, they're just waiting for their version of normal life to continue. And the unfortunate aspect is now, because we are in whatever this new normal is going to be, some people stayed in that status for too long where they were just floating around, that now they're more or less gone. They're not on the same level. You can't reason with them. You can't talk with them. You can't debate with them anymore. Because to them, they're still living in some sort of weird, truly alternate reality at this point, where everything that they see and hear is still filtered through the lens that other people who woke up no longer look through. So you're looking at the world through two different lenses, and you'll never have the same outcome as a result.
I think I have to say that in Estonia, there's like same thing, like 25-30% of the people is like wake up, and the rest of us like is still asleep and probably like take the shots because the government tell them or the advertisement tell them it will protect them. But I have like, let's see, like, we will be seeing that what the truth is in the, I think, within next week. But like I said, we want to talk about more about this Canadian Freedom Convoy. How much you know about how it started? And I know that there's like lots of conspiracy that it's like elite orchestrated, but or that it's like people started. And what's the story behind it?
Yeah, as far as my knowledge is concerned, I really think the Canadian Freedom Convoy was really something that had to happen. And it was very much a groundswell of organic support. Canadians had their backs against a wall because while here in America, we still were able to resist to some degree, in Canada, because they are not America, they're not like other countries that might have the freedoms that we take for granted. Canada was up against a wall. They had Canadian officials talking about imposing monthly fines on individuals who remained what I call all natural. They had all of these punitive measures that were being enforced on their own people. So the people had to come together and say, this has to be it. This is the hill we metaphorically have to die on. So we will take our grievances to the individuals who are foisting those grievances upon us. We will not leave until our demands are met. And that's the really important part of what the convoy was intended to do. And there's still individuals up there who are raising their voices for freedom, and I support them all the way. There's a lot of people out there who say they want to do something. They see the world around them for what it is, and they realize something has to change. But in Canada, they went to that next step. I mean, it is one thing to sit there on social media and say, I hate what's going on in the world. Okay, great. Now what? The next step has to be, what steps can I actually take to change the status quo? And when you compare what the Canadians did with what happened in America on January 6th of 2021, which, by the way, was completely miscast by the mainstream media. It was nowhere near as dangerous or violent as people said it was. And we even have individuals from, I believe it's the New York Times or Washington Post, who were recently busted by Project Veritas for more or less saying behind closed doors, oh, it wasn't that bad, it wasn't that big of a deal. Different story for a different day. But in Canada, they learned from the mistakes, some mistakes that were made by Americans, which is why they just went there with their trucks to Ottawa, the capital of Canada, and just laid on their horns. And it's really interesting when you think about it. Initially, when the convoy kicked off in Canada, there were only a few hundred vehicles when I first started paying attention to it. And that swelled to thousands upon thousands of vehicles. The Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, he called the convoy at one point in time a small fringe minority who held unacceptable views. I know this for a fact. What's very interesting is when they got to Ottawa, it only took maybe a week or 2 weeks of them just being there, causing the elites, the elected officials, to really realize how unpopular their views really were. It took only a few weeks for a small fringe minority, as Justin Trudeau called them, to warrant him calling in the police and threatening people with arrests and so on and so forth, which drives home a very important point. And it's that people, the people of any country, always, always, always have more power than they realize. But because we've gotten so accustomed to waiting for someone else to do it, waiting for someone else to take the first step, that is why so many issues in our countries continue to persist. Is because we're always waiting on someone else to take the action first, and then others will follow behind them. But that's the notion we have to really change. And everyone has to have the spirit within them that says, if it comes down to it, I'm willing to be the first person to start something. People are so scared of starting something from scratch organically because they think that they are the only ones who think the way they do. The media is very good at making you feel that way. But once you overcome those feelings of inadequacy, that is when you begin something on your own. And when you step out on your own, there's other people who are silently waiting for someone else to rally behind, because other individuals might be too scared to do it themselves. But if everyone is too scared to do anything, nothing's going to change because nothing will happen. So we have to channel that spirit within each and every one of us and then go out into the world to actually affect positive change.
And when the Canadian Freedom Convoy started, we for us, like, okay, it's more so like one, like we thought that like was a small movement that lasts some few days, but like for now, like continuing on. But from in Estonia, we tried the same thing, but first time it failed. Then a month later, we tried it another time, but it also like failed because like a handful of cars came to this, who joined with the convoy. And one guy told us that the reason was for why so many other people wouldn't join us, because the weirdos was like representing this convoy in Estonia, and I think that the problem was that it didn't want this like. I think they was more concerned about their image than the actual ability to fight for the rights. But do you think that in Canada the same thing also applies, that they think about more than about the image than the actual freedom?
No, and that's why it was so successful. When you have something that is well organized, and when you have people who no longer care about the image because it's all or nothing at this point, then that truly is the point of no return. Once someone realizes that if they just stay silent, their lives will end, literally or figuratively, then that is when they get to that next level of action. Because then it doesn't matter what you call anyone who has nothing left to lose. And that was what I saw galvanized by the Canadian convoy, was the fact that these are people who have nothing else to lose and who will put it all on the line for what matters most to them. And that's the most beautiful place anyone can actually become.
That's great. But I also thought that the Canadian government trying to like blockade it, like sending police officers to stop it, block accounts, stop the crowdfunding, and so on. Is it still like applied, and or what's going on right now?
I haven't heard too much recently, other than one of the organizers, Tamara Leash, I believe is her name. She's one of the females who was taken to jail for standing up for freedom. She has since been released. I haven't heard anything because, let's be honest, the news cycle moves so fast and there's so much going on. It's hard to keep an eye and an ear on everything going on in the world. But just because you don't hear about something as much as you might have in the past does not mean that things aren't still taking place. I know there's still legal action being exacted up there in Canada by many of those who even had their funds withheld by GoFundMe. And I know that there's campaigns that will continue. And if the best thing that came out of Canada was showing other people how to do it and how to get the government to respond, they did their job, and they should be very proud of themselves for that. But as far as current events, there has not been very much chatter on the Freedom Convoy over the past several weeks. But I'll tell you again why. It's because now everyone wants to talk about Russia and Ukraine. And that's how intentional the media is. They realize how much attention the Freedom Convoy and all this pushback against all this medical tyranny actually was. So then, of course, then the next piece has to go into play. And that's what we're seeing now with Ukraine and Russia. It's a diversion tactic. And I know there's people who are strongly on one side or the other. But here's the thing. You cannot try to help someone else or think about someone else who might be in trouble when you yourself are in trouble. It would be like, let's say, for example, let's say a bomb goes off, just hypothetically. And let's say that you are not too close to the bomb, so you catch some shrapnel and maybe it cuts your arm and your arm bleeds a tiny bit. And then someone else staggers over to you and their arm and leg has been blown off and they're saying, hey, let me help you. That doesn't make sense. They are the ones who need to help themselves first before they can help other people. But because we've got individuals here in America who want us to run over there and go to war, let's focus our efforts over there. We've got problems right here in America, in Canada, in the rest of the world that need to be fixed before we can try to go help anyone else. And that's really how people should think about the situation.
Yeah, when I first heard about this Russian-Ukraine conflict, my first thought was that it's a little bit weird because now we talk about fighting our freedoms, ending this false pandemic and so on. Yeah, and suddenly media is talking about this conflict. We should also worry about people are dying and so on. Okay, there's something wrong with it because also we know that there was a common tactic the elite uses to divide and conquer, and I think this was goal is we are this so say those who support these measures and those who didn't want to freedom, and now for this new conflict. Now okay, there are also before that was 2, now there's 4, and then soon maybe in future will be 8 and so on, and only divide and divide.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love most about, in America. I'm sure in Estonia, y'all have different phrases as well, but in America, people are aware of one phrase that we rally behind, and that phrase is united we stand. And the media knows that if you're divided, you will fall. So to your point, yes, they are distracting us with stories that they want us to pay attention to, but we have real issues that should be being talked about right now, should continue to be talked about. So we are at this place where the media is willfully dividing the people, picking any arbitrary line they can in order to make sure there's always two sides. Because when the people all come together, you see events like the Canadian Freedom Convoy. You see events like even January 6th. You see events that people have put together in France and Belgium. The list goes on of other countries that have risen up all with one voice, Australia and New Zealand as well, who have said the status quo is untenable and we must all rise up together. And you cannot suppress a people who are truly united. And that's why the media is doing what they're doing by keeping us divided at all times.
Yeah. I also heard that Canadians, the new tactic is make it as long, unbreakable chain from one coast to another coast. That how is going so far?
Say that one more time. I couldn't quite hear you.
I heard that one of the new tactics the Freedom Convoy applies is to make unbreakable human chain from west coast to east coast.
I hadn't heard very much about that, but to me, while that would be a very powerful image to portray to the rest of the world, what I fear is that there are some protests that are very effective and that actually affect change, but there are other protests that are almost more symbolic in scope. It's very similar to having a candlelight vigil if someone's missing. Yes, the candlelight vigil itself, it does exist to raise awareness about that person missing. But at the end of the day, people are holding candles, a few words are said, and then they disperse and go home. So that's the issue I have with the more symbolic protests. They might all be effective, who knows? But the fact that the Freedom Convoy attracted so much attention by the government, where the government had to save face, those are the protests I think we should be prioritizing right now, because those are the ones that are going to get us changes as quickly as possible.
But is it Freedom Convoy in US as well? Because one news I know that there's long chain around DC. Is it true or not?
Oh yeah, they're still there as far as I know. They rolled it out from California. I believe it was a few weeks ago now. And again, because everybody's talking about Ukraine, they get no media coverage whatsoever. But again, just because the media is not talking about it does not mean it does not exist. There's people up in DC. I know they're meeting with politicians. They're driving around the city, more or less inconveniencing the other side. Because that's the thing, is that people have so much power when they realize it. But so many leftists who want to force their views on everyone else, the leftists operate based on their continued and perpetual dependency. And the leftists, they expect to be able to wake up in the morning and go get their Starbucks. Someone works at Starbucks and gives them their coffee. And they go next door to the fast food place and get their morning breakfast. And then they're able to drive on these cleared roads to get to work. Someone who's working there as a janitor has everything already cleaned up for them. The point is, everything that they do in their lives is predicated on someone else in the service industry, the little guy, already having paved the way for them. And that's really the purpose behind things like the convoy. Was it annoying to hear those truck horns blaring all the time? Is it annoying to not be able to get where you want to go because there's trucks all over the road? Yeah, and that's the point. We want you to be inconvenienced, because for the last 2 years, they've gone out of their way to inconvenience anyone else who disagreed with this medical tyranny. So it doesn't really bother me if you're inconvenienced now, because you did the same thing to me and expected to get away with it. And the shoe has to always come down on the other foot.
Like I said, that people have to understand that they have the power. But for me, when I try to explain to my colleagues or friends that they have the power to end this madness, I have something like a hard thing that they need to understand, but are unwilling to act. For me, it's really problematic. And one thing compared to US, you have history where you value freedom. You also the First and Second Amendments. But in Estonia, it's a little bit. It's weird because we have our history is pretty much so that we have been under from have been constantly have someone who's controlling us. After we broke up from Soviet Union, pretty much went from one master to another master, and never understand what the freedom really is, and yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I think Americans need to realize, is that because we take so much for granted, we don't realize how people in other countries around the world, how much harder they have to fight themselves to get things that we take for granted here in America all the time. And people will talk about freedom and they say, oh, we want to rise up and take action. But I know what you're talking about. When people kind of are like, oh, I have the power myself, I'm allowed to do this. Again, the human spirit is indomitable. The human spirit desires to be free. That really is what it boils down to. So no matter where you are in the world, that fire should be burning within you. And when you realize your own government is taking it away from you, you have to speak up yourself. You might have to stand up on a hill by yourself and just start shouting the truth. But if you start doing that, you attract that audience of people who are going to also share those views. But it is very terrifying because, like I said, I've been on this journey now for almost 10 years. When I first started speaking out, I lost a lot of friends on social media and in real life. But here's the thing, if I had gotten scared of losing more friends and stopped talking 9 years ago, we would not be sitting here talking from halfway around the world tonight. It's because I kept going, and now we have connections. We can have conversations from across the globe with other individuals who also want to be free. And that really is what I want to share with other people out there who might be sitting there at home saying, what can I do? You never know what you can do until you are forced to do something or lose everything. That really is the message.
For me, when the pandemic started, and it's a month when I started understand that there is something really wrong with this, what is presented to us, and other of my friends like going along with it. Okay, I can understand something new thing, but when time goes on and on, I see like more like inconsistency, more like okay, this is another information of the contradicts what the mainstream media says and so on. And also like point out also lots of lost lots of friends and or people I thought was my friends. And
Yeah.
I think this is one thing we have to accept that. For example, that Dave Rubin from Rubin Report that said that he was liberal, then he starting bring us conservative. What's happened? He lost lots of friends, but also gained new ones, and that's
Exactly.
like expand this new. And also the thing that I think I'm alone. I think is pretty much lie because I think was like one by more than a year when I thought sharing things in Facebook, but nothing changing, and I thought that I was alone, but because I don't have had this group. But now I see, no, I'm not alone. There are lots of people who like see this lie and want to tear it down and bring back a fight of freedom and so on. And, yeah.
That's the beautiful thing that you realize, because you're going to lose people, and yeah, that does hurt. It doesn't get any easier, but over time, you would not realize how many people who think like you are out there until you put yourself out there to meet them. That's what I learned myself, because I went to a political conference in Florida about 2 weeks ago now. And I was there and I was seeing so many people that I knew who were my friends who were there. But I didn't know any of those people before I started speaking out. And therein lies the beautiful part of becoming vulnerable enough to put yourself on the line and wait to see who's going to actually come to your corner.
One guy like that point out that like when you're in a relationship, there are a lot of things that make like short like say the thing like we have in common, but the most important thing is the political point of view. That if you like value freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and so on, then like a common ground that where you can move forward. But if like let's say I'm saying one is like capitalist, other is like communist, and no one's like willing to like when we say capitalist willing to like that discuss and so on. Communist no, then okay, there's no like you can like communicate or share information because one there's like no priest that can connect us. So pretty much might point out that what are political views in like more important than like this other views. But do you have something to say as well?
We were talking about the individuals who share your views, and I think what we were discussing, was how beautiful it is when you do find that common ground with people to have that conversation. And it does become very difficult because it feels as if our two separate worlds are drifting apart. When you drift apart, there's no more common ground right here. The goal is to do what you can to reach out over that void and just make a tiny connection with someone. And it might not work the first time, second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, but if you give up, then that person's not going to come to your table and even come to listen to what you have to say. But if you just continue to attempt over and over again, eventually there will be people out there who will listen to you, who will give you that audience, and who even will agree with you. You did not even know even existed. That's the beautiful part about speaking out boldly and doing so without making an apology for what your views are.
For example, in Estonia, what we try to do is like start to build communities, like more on our point of view, it's like two systems, like those people who live in cities and those who live in the countryside, and support and use the land to support us, like people, and so becoming independent from the system. And because if you like live in a city, you pretty much you are at the mercy of the system, right? Because they got to cut down fodder, power, gas, and so on. But if you're in your countryside, you pretty much produce your own food, produce your own. You pretty much do it, become independent, and everything you need is just with your hand, just a few steps away from your house, and that's it. And for example, if you build something that produces something more than you need, then you can exchange for your neighbor who produces something you need, but and so on. Like it's become like this independent, self-sustaining system, and where we pretty much don't need the government. We are using the
and the government does not want that. That's a very good point you bring up. When you are self-sufficient, when you don't rely on the government to give you what you need to survive, the government can't control you anymore. But even people who do love freedom, there's a lot of us out there, but some of us are still a little bit too much in the system. There's so many people where, let's say, if the power does go out for a couple days, can you say you have storable food? Can you say you have a friend who has the things that you might need to survive? And if the answer is no, then you got to make some better friends, right? You have to get to that point where you don't rely on the government and those systems to help you or to bail you out, because the only reason they have power over us in the first place is because in their minds, the government thinks like this. There's one person I know over here who loves freedom, but I know that if I can just cut off their way to make money, if I cut off their way to speak, cut off their voice on social media, cut off their water or their power or their cell service or so on and so forth, then that's how I can get them to shut up. But if we begin building and really coming together and building our own communities, a parallel economy, where let's say we have our own version of email, we have our own version of Facebook, then those powers that be who are stifling voices right now, they realize, number one, there's a threat now because they've built something that rivals and threatens our company or our entity. But part two is they don't need us anymore. And that is where these governments or these tyrants really don't want to be. And that's why the Canadians, even for the Freedom Convoy, that's why they responded so quickly after just a few weeks of being made uncomfortable, because they realized the people did not care what the government said, and the people weren't in fear of what the government would do to them. And that is a very, very powerful corner to turn, and one that more people around the world should turn themselves.
Also, when I think about this, the Ukraine conflict, for me, a little bit surprising thing is that the lie is so blatant, obvious, that it's surprising that people like believe this, because like constant information say that, okay, old footage, like conflict actors and so on, still on, okay, there's something more. And it's kind of sound that I think one of the, let's say, conspiracy theorists points out that the elite is pretty much so lazy that sometimes they feel that they don't really bother to hide the truth, because they know that because the media or somewhere else, it's just people go along with it.
And you know, you're closer to Ukraine than I am, a little bit closer to Ukraine than I am. Even over here in America, yeah, we're aware of some very interesting things going on over in Ukraine. You know, lots of our American politicians have some really interesting investments in Ukraine. There's biohazard labs that are there, or bioweapons labs that are there that people are talking about. Even Zelensky, him and his exploits in the past. If you dig deep enough, you'd be surprised what you find on people like Zelensky and many individuals over there in Ukraine, right? But like you said, people don't know that information because they just want someone to spoon feed them the information they need to know. And our job not to be baby birds. Our job is to be those free eagles. Little baby birds, they allow their parents to spit in their mouths or whatever food the parent wants that child to have, if you're a bird. But when you're a free eagle, you go out and you hunt yourself. You hunt down your prey. And people need to stop being baby birds and start becoming more like the eagles who will go out and hunt for the information, hunt for the truth themselves, instead of relying on the media to spoon feed whatever they want directly into their mouths.
I think the main issue is that Ingo also mentioned that the person responsibility. People use custom that there is someone who give us this whatever they want and everything guaranteed and this other age of abundance still continues and so on. But the reality is that you have to understand that it's maybe in the point that it's ending and you have to take responsibility that make sure you prepare for this nightmare scenario and you have enough food and resources, whatever you need, and can good network as well. But right now,
we're not there yet. We'll get there. We're like this close. We're this close, but we're not there just yet. And one thing I do want to say really quick. This is off topic. Your English is fantastic. I'm assuming English is not your first language, but your English is really good. So well done to you.
Yeah. Also, they have lots of practice as well, and they also have English-speaking friends in Estonia as well. So I have a lot of practice.
I love it. Oh, well done, brother. Keep it up, because I only do English, Spanish, and some Greek. I could not do an interview in Greek. So you're killing it. You're killing it. Well done.
Okay. Now, one thing also that have you heard a thing called common law?
Yes.
That also I also heard it a couple of months ago. Thing that arbitrary law and the common law and or the law on the land and so on. That how much you know about this?
Not as much as I'd like. So I don't know if I have anything to share on that. I've heard the term though. But you know what? Honestly, let's talk about that for a minute. There's so much, like I said before, that we miss or that we don't know because of how fast the news cycle works. But here's the beautiful thing about community, Matt, Maddie, that I really want to drive home to your listeners, anyone else even out there in Estonia as well. Maddie knows things about freedom that I don't. I know things about freedom that you don't. And you know what happens when we come together? We combine our forces, and together, you and me, now we have much more knowledge. And that's the beauty of building that community. So even if you are in a small town or out in the countryside, I guarantee you, there's other people around you who know things that you don't, who are on the same side. So the goal should be to build that group or that community right where you're at. And because people do feel inadequate because they think it's a them against the world. And like you said earlier, you're not alone. I'm not alone. We have to start at that local level and building those communities, because local community groups become city community groups, become state community groups, become country community groups. And once you build in that correct way, one after the other, you're going to amass more and more people to that cause for freedom.
That's a great point. That we should, and one of the activists to practice common law, or point out is the correct way to fight for the system. That if system give order, our response support hear it and then to continue whatever we're doing. Just pretty much ignoring the system, because we are the people, we have the power, we are this. Also, our common law, the activists or practitioners, the point that this is our land, land of our ancestors, and we have like rights to be here, and the system like have to understand we follow the law of the land, we follow the common law, we not natural law, universal law, how you call it, and they have no right to force it, their own laws onto us. And people also like understand that I say that you have the right like to make the change, but I point out you have to like have like a backbone to make it the first step and go out and make it so.
100%. People don't have that, but because when you think about it, you are a white male, right?
Yes.
And here in America, white males are under attack and have been for a very long time. Here in America, organizations like Black Lives Matter and the LGBT community, and the communists and Antifa, they all hate on that particular group of people. And the reason sometimes people don't have the backbone they need is because you get tired of being attacked on all sides. I understand it. It's just natural. You're going to get tired of that, right? But the overall goal, I know here in America, is to get Americans who should be proud of their ancestral history, who should be proud of the fact that their ancestors helped to build the country, and they're being made to hate their own country. It is a very, very dangerous thing, because the powers that be know if they can get people who live in the country who should want to have common law more or less, if they get those people to hate their own country, it's game over. And the enemy knows that, which is why we have to cling to that national pride, cling to your ancestral pride, cling to what helped build this country up in the first place, and demand that it be restored. That really is the solution.
Yeah, you like mentioned that the enemy like to use this called nutritional warfare, like they like to starve you, like okay, how much you can bear it, but like the history has shown that they don't have like this backbone, like go like on and on, but in some point they like just give it up because they know that they cannot beat you. And for example, is for me, one guy I starting to listen is was Jordan Peterson, who like a Canadian psychology professor, and he interacts with them like calmly and don't allow to go out to say he maintain his frame, and they cannot do it anything, and why not? He pretty much they're lost, and
and as soon as you stop caring, you really have to kind of stop caring about appearances, what people say about you, and start doing. The less we care and the more we do, the better the outcome will be.
Yeah, but I hope this soon people will like learn that going this next step. Okay, I don't care anymore. I pretty much lost everything, and now and also some our Estonian activists point out that one thing that unites people is poverty. Like if you have no money, no food, no shop, so okay, you don't care anymore because you lost everything, and now it's people more united than ever because now they'll have something in common.
And that is the most dangerous but best place to be. It's dangerous to the enemy, to your oppressors, to your government, because once you take away everything that makes life amazing for people, once you take away any reason for them to look forward to living in the country, they become very, very dangerous. You're not saying that they can become violent, but because people who don't have anything left to lose will do whatever it takes. But until more people get to that point of discomfort where they realize there's nothing left to lose, then what we have happening now in the world will continue. But the minute more people start rising up and saying, this is it, there's nothing else to lose, it's my way or the highway, then you'll see positive change actually take place. I'm excited. The people of Estonia, people of America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Belgium, Italy, Germany, the list goes on and on. People in those countries who will stand up, get to that point, and start taking action themselves.
Well, coming back to America, I can understand that they try to like take barricade Washington, but what's like the future plan for the convoy, or how you planning to stand up for freedom?
I haven't heard much about what the convoy's future plans are, to be honest with you. I do know they do have some demands that they want to be met. The unfortunate thing is, because of timing in the media, now because of the media is talking about Ukraine all the time, and because so many of the Democrats here in America realize how bad their poll numbers are, a lot of those COVID restrictions are being relaxed or removed. Now, in the near future, if the Democrats do get reelected to the majority in America, they're going to put those enforcements right back on and then some, and they know that. But they know how unpopular their tactics have been these last 2 years. Any government in the world that has kept their citizens locked down because of this virus for the last 2 years, they know their people are tired of it. Their people are sick of it. You know, it doesn't make sense, because how can you turn on the TV and watch the Super Bowl or watch a concert and see that on TV, but then be told that the world is ending, there's this massive virus, don't go outside? It doesn't make sense anymore. And people are at that point, which is great. But now we have to continue to sound the alarm and not let them make us forget what they did to us. Because if we forget, they'll try to do it again before you can even blink your eyes.
Is there like possibility that the system uses like this summer moment to like lose it, and then somewhere in the fall they come back with even crazier restrictions?
Yep. And I think that not just in America, but in Canada, Estonia, other parts of the world, whenever your next election is, the next elections for any country are the most important. Because if we allow the side that kept us locked down to stay in power, then they're going to pretend to be your friends in the election season. And as soon as they get reelected, they are going to treat you like dirt, because that's what politicians, unfortunately, have become, more or less. So it's important that we actually elect people who stand for freedom and who do believe in the power belonging to the people, and push them up to be our elected officials, and not allow those who are currently in power to continue to remain. Because you said you're in Estonia, right? And Estonia is next to Finland, is that right?
Up north is Finland, up east is Russia, south is Latvia. And
That's right. You're Eastern European over there. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me on, Maddie. It was a pleasure to be a part. I'm very impressed with you standing for freedom over there, and I'll tell you, that inspires me to go even harder here in America myself. So.
Yeah. Right now, the stand-up of freedom is like fighting with the Goliath, like this David and Goliath situation. Like, and so I'm like, okay, I want to give up because my fellow mates they're idiots. They don't understand what we stand up, and I think in some near future, every couple of weeks, couple of months, I don't know, there should be like big something event. I don't know. Some people are telling something big is coming up, and begins wake up everyone, and those who are like haven't wake up so far. It will be a big shock for them, and
it's coming. I can't wait for it. It's coming. And you'll know when it happens, and I'll know when it happens, and I'm going to be here for all of it.
Okay, but thank you for coming, and I hope your movement will be successful. and it will be
And
successful.
Same to you, Maddie. You know, freedom always wins. I don't care if you're in America or in Estonia or any other country in the world. Freedom always wins. God's in control. And I know it feels like David versus Goliath right now, but we know who won that battle too. We're going to be okay.
Yeah. Thank you for coming. And
thank you for having me. You have a blessed rest of your night, and you hang in there over there.
We will.
All right, brother. God bless.
You too.